Good afternoon, or good morning, or even good evening for some of the people joining us today. My name is Dr. Dustin Sachs. I am Chief Technologist, Senior Director of Programs for the Cyber Risk Collaborative. I'm really excited to have everyone here for our conversation today. We're going to be talking cyber insurance essentials, protecting against the financial fallout of attacks. For those of you who are joining Cyber Risk Alliance or a Cyber Risk Collaborative webinar for the first time, every month here at CRA, we have a topic of the month, and this month it happens to be cyber insurance. We're going to talk today a lot about kind of the foundational items around it, but I'm really excited to share that in just a few weeks, April 24th, we will be meeting to share the results and the output from our recent cyber insurance task force. We've got some really cool resources and a full resource toolkit that'll be coming later in the month. For those of you who are members, please make sure to pay attention to your weekly member update. You will start to see that today and in the coming weeks as well. We'd love to have everybody there. If you're not a member, please reach out so that you can find out more about it. But for today's conversation, we're here to talk cyber insurance essentials. I want to start off first by thanking our sponsor, Sophos, for helping to underwrite this and making this possible. Judging by the fact that we had such a large turnout in the minutes just ahead of the start of this, I think this is going to be a really fun conversation. Before we jump into our conversation, though, for those of you who may be new to the Cyber Risk Collaborative, I want to spend just a minute or two really kind of introducing the Cyber Risk Collaborative. The Cyber Risk Collaborative is a community of current and future cybersecurity leaders, CISOs, their direct reports, their teams, that come together to not only share information, but to work together in peer groups to address cybersecurity issues, to learn from each other, to develop themselves as leaders as well. Our mission here at the Cyber Risk Collaborative is to enable career development for current and future cybersecurity leaders. We do this through a vendor and analyst-free environment. Our vendors and our analysts and external analysts certainly provide some insight and provide support to us, but the conversations that we typically have within the community are amongst the security leaders. We're here as well to increase organizational intelligence through executive management resources and our CISO developed tools, resources, and templates that are part of our resource library and our resource toolkits. We do all of this by allowing members to expand their networks in a 24/7 real-time access to a global community of top security leaders, and again, cutting-edge tools and insights to help with operational efficiency. Our value proposition, why we do this. First, it's about leadership development. It's about workforce development. It's about helping you do the job of security that much easier. That's why we're here talking about this topic today. It's why we will be talking about this topic throughout the month, and why we've got a lot of different resources and opportunities throughout the month of April to share with you. We do it through tools and solutions, as I mentioned, resource toolkits that'll be coming out later this month around cyber insurance. We've got 19 other resource toolkits currently. Peer collaboration, both in-person peer collaboration, virtual peer collaboration, and conferences as well. We've got our conferences season is about to come up. We're going to be out at RSA. We're going to be at hosting Identiverse. We've got InfoSec World coming up later this year. So really great opportunities to meet in person, destination, really get to interact with your peers. And of course, we also allow for, and encourage personal brand building. As I mentioned, 19 resource toolkits. These resource toolkits are available to our premium members, and they contain not only the guidance documents that help you understand a specific topic, but all the tools and resources needed to get started, to actually start doing the work. we found that it saves significant amounts of time, uh, significant amount of money, and allows your teams to find ways to really implement the things that you hear through discussions in a tangible manner, with minimal or reduced overhead. The URL that you see on screen describes all about our various resource toolkits. Uh, I'll be sharing an email address at the end for Tom Ward, who, if you're interested in learning more about resource toolkits, you can certainly learn. And the members, the premium membership as a whole, you're more than welcome to reach out to him after this webinar. With that, I'm going to move to introducing our panel today. I'm really excited to have Andre Oliver, who's Senior Director of Information Security for Allianz Life, and Sally Adam, who is Senior Director at Sophos. So, Andre, you want to say hello and introduce yourself a little bit more to the group first?
Yeah, awesome. Great to be here with you this afternoon. First of all, I want to apologize. I had the technology bug bite me today, so you won't get to see my beautiful face, but hopefully we'll have a great conversation with good interactions, and we'll move on just accordingly. So, Anya Oliver, Deputy CISO here at Allianz Life. Happy to have this conversation and be here with you today, and hopefully it'll keep you entertained and keep the conversation moving. Obviously, welcome here with Sally as well, so I'll turn it over to Sally.
Brilliant. Thank you, Anna-Dre. So yeah, I'm Sally Adam. I'm with Sophos. We're a leading global provider of cybersecurity products and services, and I'm responsible for our cyber insurance partnerships and our cyber insurance research. And as you may have picked up from my accent, I'm based in the UK. I'm just outside Oxford, so I'm very pleased to be with you all this evening.
Well, thank you so much for joining us late in your day. For many of us, I'm here in the central part of the U.S. It's 1:00 in the afternoon for our West Coast U.S. Brothers and sisters. It's 11 a.m. in the morning for our East Coast team. They're already at happy hour. It's 2 in the afternoon for them. So, but thank you both for being here. And to start off, to kind of set the stage, I was looking kind of in the setup to this at some of the statistics that are out there about just the market share around and really what the market around cyber insurance is. We all in our daily life, and I know we're going to use this analogy throughout, is health insurance and auto insurance, and the kind of personal insurance that we're all homeowners insurance and personal insurance we're all very familiar with. And I think we all know that those are massive $100 billion, $1 trillion markets. It was interesting to see that Munich Reinsurance actually expects that the global cyber insurance market this year will reach somewhere around about $16 billion. And it doesn't take a lot to stop and think about why having cyber insurance and can be so beneficial, and where it can really save the day. I mean, we go back to an incident that happened, late last year, Friday after morning, where everybody woke up and their systems weren't working, and we saw a massive shutdown worldwide of travel and hospitals, and I mean, you name it. And without cyber insurance and the cyber insurance market, certainly, or several organizations may have, suffered fatal blows to their revenue and to their budgets. Sally, can you set a little bit of the stage of what we're talking about when we talk about the cyber insurance market, and really how big is it? How much is it a part of kind of the daily life of business these days?
Yeah, that's a really great research there, and it very much echoes what we're seeing. There's real growth in the cyber insurance market, and organizations are increasingly moving from maybe having cyber insurance as a tick on a general business insurance policy, maybe a general liability policy, moving over to have it as very much a standalone policy. And I think there's a couple of things that are behind it. So I'd love to know what you both think, but absolutely, there's greater awareness of the impacts to organizations if there is a cyber incident. And you mentioned one from last year, but it could be lost data, accidental, it could be malicious, lots of reasons that there could be a cyber incident that can have pretty enormous consequences for a business. And having cyber insurance provides that coverage, that risk transfer, so that if something bad does happen, you can call on the policy for both advice and financial support to get you through. I think,
Ab- yeah,
sorry.
absolutely. No, absolutely. And first of all, and I know some people have already started to find it, but if you have questions that you want to pose for the panel, we will take questions. You'll see in the center of your screen two little thought bubbles that look like that have a Q and an A in them. Please feel free to use that to submit questions. You can also submit questions in the chat, but Andre, you and I have both been in the position as deputy CISOs of having to oversee the cyber insurance process and helping to gather the information and make sure not only that all of your ducks are in a row, but that you've got it. Um, when you're looking at the cyber insurance process as a practitioner and as a leader, what are some of the things that stand out to you, and as part of that, what are some of the kind of key concerns or key areas where you yourself find sometimes that you're like, I don't really even understand this?
That is a great question. I think the approach, I think, for cyber insurance, I think for a lot of practitioners, it feels like it makes sense. And I think a lot of times when we approach it, or just in theory, we think about it, kind of as that additional tool in our tool belt, when it should really be part of our overall process, right? Just as you're going through pen tests, as you're going through those things that are actually vital to your organization, this should be one of those things that just should be part and parcel to the approach that you take. Right, so I think when I began looking at the policies, just the number of things that fall into the case of being covered versus what's not covered. It's always a thing they talk about, scenarios where you have hurricane coverage, but you don't have water damage, or you got fire coverage, but you don't have smoke damage. The same kind of perspectives move in the case of your cyber insurance policies. And as I was looking at some, and obviously looking at some of the horror stories, I found that some of the things that are most often common issues, right, in breaches or those types of things are the very things that most often in your cyber insurance policies at times aren't covered. And one of the challenging things that I saw in one of the policies that insider attacks in some policies is not a thing that's covered. But if we look at the top things that happen inside of breaches, insider attacks is one of the most common things that we see. From our statistics last year, I think we saw the average was about 4.9 million in fines, and I think that we see that the average rate of that coming through about 7.5% of the time when we're having breaches. So when you begin to look at the things that are common in breaches and the way that they relate to policies, you begin to ask yourself different questions. Am I doing this the right way? Am I looking at the right things? So I was just surprised at the breadth and depth that they go to in the exclusions and how much time we should be spending with that we probably are not.
Absolutely. And Sally, Andre brings up a really interesting question, and a really interesting point, which is from your experience, and as you coach organizations, what are some of the biggest misunderstandings that organizations have about what cyber insurance covers and doesn't cover?
Well, I think one of the big things that comes through from what we've seen is that lots of people don't know what their policies cover. So people are spending a whole load of money on these cyber insurance policies, but 40% of IT teams don't know if it covers ransom payments. That's a pretty big fundamental one. I think it's 38% don't know if it covers instant response. So there's actually a whole load of lack of visibility into what the policies cover. And to Andrea's point, there's a lot of detail in the small print. But what I think is really helpful is to take that step back and think about it as a broader team, because cyber insurance is in many ways different from those other forms of insurance that you were mentioning before. Cyber insurance probably touches more parts of the organization than the many other policies, because of course the cybersecurity, the IT team are involved in knowing, okay, what technologies, what cyber controls have we got in place. But then you've got the finance team, you've got the risk management team, you've probably even got the sales team who have perhaps committed to some contracts on the basis that you have cyber insurance coverage to a certain level. So as you're thinking about, okay, the scope, the structure, the policy, what you need, actually having that step back and figuring out what do we need as a holistic team is a really helpful step.
Yeah, and while you certainly point out, and rightfully so, that cyber insurance, the policies are often fundamentally kind of different in terms of what's at risk compared to those kind of more known kind of everyday personal insurance policies. I still think that there's a really interesting corollary, and I think certainly when I communicate to, and when I would communicate to my teams, and the organization, I'd go, you wouldn't get a health insurance policy if you didn't know that it covers your kid's well check visit, or this medicine or that medicine. You wouldn't get, like, who would go out and say, yeah, you know what, I'm going to pay a bunch of money for my car insurance policy. I have no clue if it actually covers my car or not. I just but I got the policy because I could afford it and it was great. I don't know if it covers my car. I don't know if it covers, a flood or what have you, but I'm good with that. We wouldn't do
Yeah.
that. So you almost have to, at a kind of fundamental, and it sounds funny, but you have to stop and really think about the way in which you approach cyber insurance as you compared to other types of insurance, because yes, there are differences to it, but fundamentally it's about having something in place when things go bad. It's the insurance. I always found it interesting because insurance is one of those things where you pay for it under the premise you're never going to use it, but when you have to use it, it's great to have it. So, you know
And I don't disagree with you,
yeah.
Dustin. I think it's more that I was trying to say is that there are more people involved. There's more departments
Oh yeah.
involved. Like, yeah, when you take maybe the vehicle policy, there's probably just facilities and maybe finance involved. Whereas cyber insurance, it just touches more parts of the business, and we need to
So
make sure we bring them all in.
I'll pose this question. It actually came in, and I really liked it, and it's kind of on point right now. And I'll start with you, Andre. But the question that came in from Stephen Lord: if someone has cyber insurance, does that mean your security defenses can be lax? And this is a great, it sounds at first like it's one of those like no brainer questions, but as we're talking about misunderstandings and the assumptions that organizations have, I know I certainly have heard from business before. Oh yeah, we've got cyber insurance. We don't care if this data gets ransomed, because we've got enough to cover to pay the ransom and we're good. Can you
Yeah, I
truly
would
take that approach?
I would probably caution against that, because I think the statistics are showing that almost 45% of policies are being denied because of just that very thing. As everyone understands, this is in some capacity or some way or shape, this is kind of a game, right? And insurance companies don't make money paying out claims, just to be clear, right? And so as you're thinking about this policy and your approach to this, and this is why I go back to the broader conversation of the strategy, it needs to be part of your strategy. We talk about loss exceedance curves for those who are into probabilities and statistics. We talk about that the risk appetite that you have for your organization. When I think about a scenario where this is perfectly positioned, it's somewhere between that loss exceedancy curve and that inherent risk. And it covers that piece of that scenario for which you are comfortable with a loss and you have the appropriate level of controls in place. As that gap gets wider between your inherent risk, right, and your loss exceedancy curve, or where your appetite is, we should be adjusting that policy to hopefully align with that. And the better you get with your policy, maybe the less insurance that you need, but be clear in your approach. You definitely need it. So I don't think it gives you the ability to get out of it. And what we see now is specifically more insurance companies are hiring practitioners because they want to ensure that you are doing due diligence above and beyond a checkbox. So I don't think it gives us a way out. I just think we have to be more consistent and more deliberate in our approach. And if we can do that, I think it positions us very nicely to deal with these claims coming forward.
And stepping back for a moment, again with you, Andre, we talked to, and Sally mentions, the involvement of, more of the business in the, the risk and the things that might be covered or might need to be covered by cyber insurance. as a security practitioner, how important is it, and what has been your approach to working with the other departments, maybe legal, maybe risk management, maybe enterprise risk, IT, whoever, um, when it comes to the cyber insurance policy? Because so much of what we start out doing in security, we start in kind of our silo, and then we try to reach out to other teams. But isn't cyber insurance one of those places where you have to from the get-go start with the silos broken down, or or can it still follow that same model?
I think the more input that you get, obviously, because we have this ultimate policy in place to protect the business, to be first and foremost. And so to make the decision without the business, that's a risk that I'm not sure that you really want to run if you want to stay, if you want to stay in your current place of employment. So I think what I would say, I was surprised, and I have a fantastic group of CISOs, and we talk oftentimes about these topics. And one of the things that, as I was querying different CISOs, how many people are actually involved in the renewal process, right? How many people are actually involved in the initial process? We get that policy, we renew it annually, but is there ever a time when we look at almost like our annual pen test where we're adding this piece to the conversation to see if, depending on the exploit and the attack, if we have the right cyber insurance in place? I don't know that we do, right? So it becomes one of those things that it's there, it becomes the umbrella, but I don't know how often we really look at the validity of that policy to align to the controls and the threats that we have in our environment today. So I think, to answer your question, you definitely want to have the business at the table. You definitely want to have practitioners. You definitely want to have legal, all those key entities at the table, because they all bring different aspects that cost money, I think, in the long term. And having that perspective available to you as you're navigating that time, if you are unfortunate enough to be in that scenario, are just those things that might really just save you in that context. So the more the merrier, and I think everybody has a place at the table when it comes to building that policy and maintaining it.
Absolutely. And Sally, shifting a little bit, and really playing off something that Andre brought up, but what do you see in your practice, as one of the areas or the policy elements that security teams should be aware of? Maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but what are the key ones they should be aware of? And where are the ones or the coverage gaps where you're like, I really wish you had paid attention to this, or you really need to make sure you understand this one because you're overlooking it?
Yeah, so great question, and I think one of the areas that is can be really confusing with the insurance applications when you're looking at them is the terminology that's used. And I have to say, I've been in the cybersecurity industry for 17 years, and sometimes I'm looking at the questions, I'm thinking, I'm not quite sure what this is. So, having taken the time to really understand, okay, what are they looking for here, and how does what we have align with it? So, an example we see quite often, EDR, endpoint detection and response. That's often asked for, is often a box, and thinking, well, actually maybe you have an extended detection and response solution, XDR, which is more comprehensive technology. It's not exactly the same acronym, but actually you have the capabilities that they're looking for and they're asking about in that question. So you can go ahead and say that you have it. So I think one of the things is trying to align the technologies and the broader processes and cyber controls that you have in place with what the terminology that's asked for on the policy, and that can be a pretty big piece in itself.
Yeah, and I
That
think
make
just to
that,
just
yeah, please, Andre.
No, I was just gonna tag on to what Sally says, and I think it just goes back to reiterate the conversation around making an event for the team, right? So when you get those technologies that we often see and we love in cybersecurity space, EDR, XDR, CASM, whatever acronym we're using today, having those subject matter experts that can walk you through that, because a lot of times people understand you may have a technology, you may not even have it deployed in the right scenario. One of the ones we commonly see is MFA, right? And we know that all MFA is not created equal. So I think having those subject matter experts at the table that are partnering with you to create that vision of what the posture of your environment looks like is critical, not only to the conversation, but in scenarios like this where you're really trying to assess what you have in reference to your policy.
That makes complete sense. So, we started to talk about, and I want to move into kind of the second kind of key area, which is this idea of the process of starting to assess and document and put together and understand what are the different technologies that you're using, and one of the things that we certainly heard in the task for in the cyber insurance task force that just wrapped up was, you know a lot of organizations try to treat it like getting pulled over by a police officer, give as little information as possible, never admit to anything if they don't know about it. But the importance of leveraging, a broker or somebody as to help you kind of get through the process. But what are some of the challenges, Andre, that you're facing uh, when it comes to documenting your security posture specifically around cyber insurance? Is there a Are you finding that the insurance company wants more information than you're willing to give? Are they typically okay with what you're giving? Where are some of the challenges that you're finding?
Well, in my specific situation, I'm fortunate enough to have a great team, obviously, at a local and obviously at a national level that we can partner on to provide a lot of that context. So for me, it's a little bit easier. I would say as a practitioner looking at it, however, I think it is it's a bit of a different beast, mainly because you're trying to really document or assess the current posture of your organization. And I would say the biggest challenge we have as organizations, and I'll quote Doug Hubbard, right? You have more data than you need, right? And you don't need as much as you think you do, right? And so in that conversation, what I really mean is that to the degree that you can quantitatively, right, discuss the posture of your organization, it gives you a great place to start from. So much of our assessments, our process, our thought around risk is red, green, yellow. And that is very hard to articulate to a cyber risk insurance policy. And so you have to be able to take another look, a quantitative look at your current posture in your organization to put those in dollars. That helps you align your policy. That helps you understand where you have gaps. It helps you understand, quite honestly, where you need to invest. And when you can take a look at it in that approach, it really, and don't want to say simplify it, but it makes it easier, right, to understand the approach and strategy that you need to take when you move away from the colors to numbers that actually make sense not only to you but also to the business.
And I'm really glad that you brought up the red, yellow, green stoplight color that methodology that we use. As somebody who's colorblind, I really don't appreciate the the color wheel because it's very subjective. Some of us don't maybe understand the difference between green and yellow sometimes, or at least that's what at least that's what the excuse that I've got prepared when I run that red light later today. But we'll see if that one works. But um, Sally, when it comes to putting together the package of information that you're going to give to your cyber insurer, what are some of the things that underwriters are typically asking for? What are some of the things that that are almost always the things that they're going to be asking for and looking for when it comes to evidence or information about your security program?
Yeah, so they often ask for lots of information. Andre mentioned some of the technologies. What have you got in place? What are your processes? That kind of thing. And when as you're kind of looking at this, I think actually there's an opportunity to think about it a little bit differently in the thinking. Actually you've got strong defenses. You've got a really thought through approach to mitigating risk for your organization. When you're doing that, you're actually a desirable candidate for an insurer. They get a lot of applications, and as Andre said, they don't want to pay out. So if you are a well prepared organization that has a sensible, appropriate program of cybersecurity, then get that in front of them so that you can make it work for you. You are an attractive client. I've heard insurers say, hey, organizations that are using an MDR service, they're our tier one customers. They're the ones we most want. So, be both responsive to what they want, but also make the most of what you've done. The fact that you've done these reviews, the fact that you have done your assessments, you've gone through all those elements that under a day was mentioning, and then put yourself on the front foot. Go out early. Whether as a broker or going directly, and share. Look, these are the controls. I think MDR is probably the biggest one to highlight, because there's so many different elements within, that can impact a policy. But one of the things that has the biggest impact on outcomes, are you going to experience an incident, and if so, what will be the scope of that incident, is having a 24/7 threat detection and response. And for most small and mid-sized organizations, that really means going to a specialist provider to help you. So if you are using that approach, if you are using an MDR service, shout it loud and proud, and get your broker to get you the best deal, given you are that attractive candidate. So think about it as a way to sell yourselves and get the best policy for you.
Absolutely. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that, for any organizations that might be out there looking and trying to figure out, who do I go with, who do I use for MDR, who do I use as my managed service provider, Cyber Risk Alliance certainly has a whole aspect of the business that focuses on that MSSP managed service provider. So we can certainly, there are members of the Cyber Risk Alliance organization that can help you out if you're struggling with who to work with. Couple of questions that came in that I think are really relevant right where we're at right now. Sally, James O'Brien asks, do the cyber insurance companies themselves invest in cyber defense technologies that are specifically focused on reducing their exposure because of your lack of appropriate controls?
Yeah, so the insurance providers are increasingly adding value to their offerings with additional services, and they're also doing, for example, scanning when they are assessing applications to see, okay, how risky is this organization? Is it an organization that's got lots of public exposure that we are less willing to take on? So yes, very much insurers are looking to both add value to their service, because it's an increasingly competitive market for them. There are more and more providers of cyber insurance, and for the low risk clients, there's competition for them, and so yeah, that's definitely there. They also want to reduce their likelihood of having to pay out by weeding out the high risk organizations who have weak defenses. But to the point, okay, are cyber insurance providers doing this because the cybersecurity industry is not doing what it needs to do? I think that they are very much two sides of the same coin. We all want to reduce the likelihood of an organization experiencing an incident and the impacts of cyber threats on businesses. We're all working to the same aim. So I very much see us as two parts of the whole, and it's more, in my view, the complementary piece. What can we do together? There's no one single bullet to stop a cyber threat and to stop a cyber claim. So it's very much complementary elements. And also just thinking of it to the application of those elements as well. Like, you could have a great technologies, if you haven't switched it on. I could have a great home intruder alarm system, but if I haven't switched it on, it's not going to do me any good. So it's a balance of those two.
And I won't say who said it, but I will point out and stop for a moment, back up a little bit here, which is MDR, managed detection and response. We did use the MDR term and didn't define it, and so fair point. Thank you to the person who asked us for that, because that's what we're here for, to help you learn new acronyms, because we don't have enough of them in cybersecurity. So, Sally, again, one of the questions that kind of came in, I think that's really interesting, and actually there are two questions. I'll start with the first one, which is, when it comes to the technologies that you are implementing in your organization to make yourself more secure, who's responsible for the warranty of those, or for issues that go around that? If your MDR tool or service, for whatever reason, fails, will cyber insurance, is that something cyber insurance will cover, or are you kind of on the hook for the warranty failure?
Yeah. So cyber insurance, whether it covers, a failure, for example, in the MDR service, I think typically it would. But to the earlier points, you do need to check out the small print and be aware of what's there. But I think of cyber insurance and warranties as two separate but complementary elements. So a bit like with your car, I've got a warranty on my car. So if something goes wrong with my car that shouldn't go wrong, then I can call on the warranty. But if something goes wrong that's broader than that, maybe somebody drives into me, I put the wrong fuel in the vehicle, I not paying enough attention, and I clip someone as I'm turning. Those are all things that the insurance would step in and cover. And it's similar, I think, for on the cyber front, so for example, MDR, Managed Detection and Response Service, and hands up, it was me who mentioned the acronym without explaining. Yeah, so we have a warranty, an up to $1 million warranty with our Managed Detection and Response Service, which we underwrite in-house. So it's Sophos's skin in the game. And if we fail to do what we needed to do, then absolutely that would cover. But if there was something else, so that was beyond our control, then that's really when the cyber insurance would kick in.
So the second part of this, and then Andre, I want to certainly get your input on a couple of the questions that we've gotten as well. David Olive asks, and I'm going to modify it slightly because I think there's some more fundamental, maybe, education behind this. But can you explain for those who may not be familiar, Sally, the difference between the primary insurance carrier and this idea of reinsurance?
Gosh, well, I I want to put a big disclaimer that I am not in the insurance industry here, so please, you and Andre, step in if I misspeak. But yeah, so the reinsurance is typically insurance for the insurers. So it's them being able to get additional capital that enables them to spread their own risk. And provide the services that they deliver. So that's certainly how I understand it. Does that align
Yeah,
with your
no,
thinking?
spot on. And the question that David really was asking was around, what are the policy coverage differences that occur when it comes to the primary insurance carriers and the reinsurance policy? Because, for example, Lloyd's, which does insurance and reinsurance, doesn't cover cyber ransomware attacks, because they can't get coverage from, like, they'd be left holding the bag if something happens, and they can't get reinsurance from and coverage for themselves. And the question was around whether or not this requires kind of government intervention, and that's, I think, outside the scope of kind of the conversation today. But I really wanted to just make sure everybody kind of understood the difference between the two topics.
Yeah.
Andre, sorry, please.
No, you're good. I was just agreeing.
Oh, awesome. So one of the questions that came in, and Andre, I'm going to start with you to get your perspective on how you've seen this play out, or if you've seen this play out. And I'm going to broaden it a little bit. The specific question came from Robert Palmisano, excuse me. And the specific question was, does AI require a separate rider? Are you starting to see that, is AI now a separate aspect of cyber insurance, or is it part of the kind of overarching policy? And I think the larger question is, as we start talking about emerging technologies, be it quantum computing, be it deep fakes, be it whatever it may be, are the insurance policies keeping up with those emerging trends, or are you still left kind of having to add those on after the fact? I don't know if you've seen any of that, if you've experienced that.
I can tell you that the amount of times I've used AI in 1 week is probably more than I want to talk about right now. But if I had to back it up, I would say when I think about it, and I think you started to hint on part of the topic here. Technology aside, I think when we look at how we're using, right, cyber insurance, it's most cases it's to deal with the vulnerabilities or the issues that lead to loss of service or loss of business. So it's the attacks, right? And so technology aside, they all end up falling into a couple of different scenarios and how they might impact an organization. It could be data exfiltration. It could be used for, business email compromise. It could be used sometimes to help exploit, zero-day vulnerabilities. Those are all plays that line in the space of AI. It's just exactly how the attack is being utilized in the environment that we're using that cyber insurance for. When we see how AI is being used up to this point, it's really, I see it primarily more so used in the social engineering types of things because that's more of the low-hanging fruit. It's easier to get to, and to be quite honest, the bite rate on that is a lot better than it is for most other things. And so I don't know that you necessarily need to modify your approach to your policy. You just need to be cognizant of the fact that now the things that probably were maybe not as relevant probably now will be because of the things that people can do with AI, right? The emails are getting a lot better. We're seeing more AI used sometimes in web scraping, front pages. So we're seeing more ways that this is actually being utilized, and that's giving more tools to the bad guys. But I still think the primary concerns that you're using this for, which are to protect your organization, don't significantly change. It's just the manner, the rate, the scope, and the scale of how we're going to see those things. So if you've got a great policy, a great strategy on how you're using yourself or how you're using those policies to protect your organization, stay with it. Obviously, understand where AI has input and value, and build and go from there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Sally, please.
Oh, sorry. No, sorry. I was just going to completely agree with Andre in terms of what we're seeing from the threat side of things. Like the actual attack vectors aren't really changing. It's phishing, it's scams. Their primary attack vectors. They're just getting smarter. They're getting more sophisticated. So it's not like a whole new direction. It's just we need to be more alert that there's no longer the typos or the poor grammar in the phishing email that are the tells. It's a perfectly written email. We need to just up level our own suspicion. But the AI is just improving the quality and in some cases the quantity of the threats, but it's not changing what the cyber insurance is there for overall.
Absolutely. So, and I'll pause here. There was a question that came in, really great question, one that I should have probably started with. Yes, a copy of this recording, this webinar itself will be available. It typically takes about an hour or two after the end of the webinar for it to be available as an on-demand webinar. It will be available at scworld.com, the SC Media website. So you will be able to come back and see this later, share it with your friends if they want to come hear about cyber insurance. That we always appreciate that. We always enjoy that. So one of the questions that came in, and it really actually tails really nicely to one of the questions that one of the last questions I wanted to address before we get into really all the rest of the Q&A from the audience is, Sally, starting with you. What are some of the metrics? What are some of the best ways you've seen, back to Andre's point about not using the red, yellow, green, or high, medium, low, or critical, or all of those things to communicate risk exposure? What are some of the best metrics you've seen organizations share or use to communicate their risk? And what are the methods that you've seen be most effective for organizations to use those risk metrics to come up with the best estimation of how much insurance do we really need?
Yeah, so there's a few things to unpick in that, and just to touch on that last bit, like how much insurance do I really need? Well, that's a fundamental question because our research shows that when there's a ransomware incident and there's a claim, the insurance covers on average 63% of the costs incurred. And the number one reason they don't cover all the costs is because the policy limit had been reached. So the amount of insurance the organization had taken out wasn't enough to cover them. So knowing how much you need is really important. But you're talking about, what's the best approach? An approach I love to talk about, and I think is really easy for everyone across the business to understand and share. It's a great communication tool, is the 4Ts. And it's not exclusive to managing cyber risk. It's a really effective risk management framework. But it really has the premise. There's four ways to manage a risk. You can terminate an activity. So you can, for example, you've got an unsecure file sharing system. You can just shut it down. You can eliminate that risk. You can terminate it. You can tolerate it. So there may be some risks, and you say, actually, yes, it's a risk, but it's more important for the business that we keep it going. So maybe, it's an MRI scanner in a hospital that you haven't been able to patch, but the patient benefits are so great that you make a decision to keep it running, but not have it connected to the network. Then you can treat it, which is where cyber controls, cyber behaviors come in, and then you can transfer it. And of course, that's what insurance is. It's risk transfer, transferring the risk that we're going to have to cover the full cost in the event of an incident over to the insurance provider. So you've got these kind of four pieces, and then the more you kind of up level them, terminate, tolerate, treat, then affects how much you've got to transfer over. So I really love this framework, is just thinking, okay, what are the things we need to be thinking about? Okay, what are we going to treat? What are we going to tolerate? What are we going to terminate? And then where does that leave us in terms of what we need to transfer? How are we going to work out then, okay, what do we need to pass over, whether it's an insurance policy or, to your earlier point, a warranty. And that gives a framework that you can then start quantifying a bit, what would this look like? What will it mean? But in a way that everybody can understand. So then you can have conversations that, something Andre picked up before. It's like, do we actually want to step back and figure out where are the gaps in our defenses? Where do we need to treat better before we then go into those cyber insurance policy negotiations, because we've identified a risk that we really want to deal with? And then that puts us in a better position. So they're not numbers on that, but I find that 40s framework is something that everyone just gets when you talk about it, and it's a really powerful tool. And you can be, at a higher level, but you can be a CISO and use it as a framework for going super deep as well.
No,
Yeah, and just
absolutely, and that's great. Andre, I was going to ask you, from your perspective, what are the ways you've found to be the most effective to communicate the risk exposure that you've got as an organization, and then figure out what's the right amount of money? And would love to get your thoughts before we move into some of the questions in the last kind of 10 minutes of the webinar.
Well, I'm more of an optimistic person, so I'm going to give you my optimistic view. If in the perfect world, if I could do this, how I would do it. And this is one of the things, or one of the scenarios, where I think AI, or for people that have actually been around long enough, machine learning really get benefit from this topic. But listen, regardless of the size of your organization, what you do, what customers you serve, how many people you have inside your organization, there is data on the probability of an attack, the type of person that would attack you, the types of things that they might do. We can see that from the kill chain and the associated value and risk associated with that. So when you have those things kind of already in your arsenal for where you might be vulnerable, how it might happen, the ways that it might occur, the associated downtime with that particular attack, you now have more data than you probably had prior to the process. That not only helps you understand how you should be sizing your policy, right, but that also helps you understand from a defensive standpoint where you should be prioritizing your defenses. Most oftentimes, as we're going through this conversation of defense, we have a lot of technical debt. That's all that stuff that you got when you thought it was going to be the next thing. And I promise I'll only say it once today, zero trust, that half of us don't really understand. The next thing that we're trying to implement that doesn't get there, that helps us halfway but doesn't get us all the way. And so taking a good look at that process, understanding where we're likely to be attacked, what the potential downtime for that would be, any fines, all those types of things, from a quantitative, and I'll say it again, quantitatively assessing these things, positions you better to have the conversation. the finance team, your CFO, your leadership, they don't understand cross-site scripting. It doesn't make sense. I've tried it. It doesn't work, right? But if I tell them that that server is going to be down for 5 days, they know that, what that means in dollars. And so when you can evolve the process or the conversation away from the things that we love to talk about to stuff that resonates in those different circles, that's how we begin to quantify the risk. That's how we get buy-off from leadership on investing in cybersecurity, and that is more importantly how we get the right level of visibility around the posture of the organization.
Andre, I wasn't going to do it, but you just threw down the gauntlet. I'm going to have you in the next 10 minutes explain cross-site scripting so that my 12-year-old son will understand it. Ready, go. No, no, no. Very, very, very important, very valid points. So there are a couple of questions that have come in. I want to address a couple of the questions kind of more generally, and then I definitely want us to spend, the last 5 minutes or so talking about a couple of the questions that came in. There was a question that came in about, how do cyber criminals choose their victims? Great question. Love the question. That's a whole nother webinar on its own, and probably drinks at your local drinking establishment to have that conversation. Love the question. Definitely want to acknowledge that it was asked and that it is a really important question, because understanding that is kind of fundamental. Another question that came in about each state having its own rules in event of an incident, and yes, while incident reporting and when do you activate cyber insurance and when do you not can vary depending on state, sometimes industry, some of the things that you might have to address. Again, a much larger conversation, and certainly one that we have and will continue to have here at the Cyber Risk Collaborative and at Cyber Risk Alliance. Couple of the questions that I did want to address. One of them that came in, and Sally, I'm gonna direct this one to you. Is, there's been some reports and some news and some information out there that certain types of companies, high risk, for example, virtual currency, other kind of high risk industries, are unable to purchase cyber insurance at all, or only with very, very, very limited liability available. Is that generally true? Is this kind of we see it's the exception as opposed to the norm for those high risk industries? Are there specific ones that stand out in your mind as ones that are routinely having this problem?
So I don't know is the short answer to that one.
Fair,
So
absolutely fair.
I can speak. We know that there's these few industries that are particularly sensitive, but we do see a lot of organisations that have in the past struggled to get coverage because they have lacked some of those fundamental gates that you must pass through in order to be considered for a policy. And certainly over the last few years, the bar, the kind of the minimum requirements that insurers have in order to get a policy, that has gone up. So Andre mentioned MFA before. Trying to get a cyber insurance policy when you haven't got MFA is virtually impossible now. So there's definitely a overall elevation in the level of cyber controls that insurers are looking for, and the higher the controls you are, the lower the risk, the easier it is to access policies. But as to the specifics for some of those super high risk, very highly targeted organizations, I'm afraid I'd have to turn it over to someone a bit closer to the topic.
Absolutely. And Andre, from your perspective and from your experience, being in kind of the trenches of security as well, what are some of the things that you've heard or seen or experienced as being those things that are almost always, we just mentioned MFA, not having MFA as being one of the things that will almost always disqualify you. Are there other ones that you've seen or that you've heard or discussed with your peers that are the kind of key things where if you're not doing this, you're probably not going to be able to get insurance?
So, obviously, quantifying the fact that I'm not obviously writing the policy, but I'll just tell you
Right.
war stories and things that I've heard. So some of the common things that I see, if your program is very immature, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't at least try, because I think there's value in that, and it will give you perspective on how you need to build. But ones that your process and you're very immature, if you're not making significant progress, or if you are failing basic audit types of things, those are ones where it's going to be more complicated. If you have existing vulnerabilities, if you've had a breach already, right, and the conversation or the remediation and strategy wasn't clear in how you remediated that can sometimes be, some of the factors that might weigh into the conversation. I think Sally can probably talk about this in more detail. Again, conversations around the technology stack really is where a lot of these things are made or broken, right? When they understand the maturity of the program, when you can speak to confidence of the assets and what you're truly protecting, and you can really reflect the posture, you've got a great opportunity. When you have those variables that are out there, things that you, like you said before, aren't willing to talk about, those are things that are going to come to the forefront and you're going to have answers for. So when we see those types of pre-existing conditions, we see, poor security policy or practice. We see scenarios where you've had, breaches happen in the past. Those are some of those factors that I won't say that they'll necessarily disqualify you, but I think they're definitely going to look at you a little bit differently when you come in to really initiate the process to begin that policy.
Absolutely. And I know we're coming up on our time, and this has been a phenomenal conversation, and one that I'm sure we could continue for another hour if we really wanted to. And it sounds like there's, we've got a pretty amazing attendance today that's stuck in on this topic. But one of the last questions that really just came in, Jonathan Abramson asked a really great question. Andre, I'll let you answer, and then I'll certainly answer as well. But have you run into situations where another company you work with requires you to have cyber insurance?
Oh my goodness, yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much par for the course at this point. Whether we're dealing with vendor relationships, I mean, if you've been consulting, DNA has been something that's been out there for as long as I can remember, right? So it's one of those things. I think that people are understanding the ramifications around not having it. Third-party relationships are vital to most organizations. So some of the livelihood for some organizations depends on that third-party conversation. So I would say absolutely. If you're working with third-party vendors, it should be a requirement. And if you're not doing it today, there should be definitely a conversation had on how you need to pivot policy and get moving that way for sure.
And I'll just add, as somebody who, supply chain risk has been or was the area of my doctoral dissertation. It's been the area that I've spent quite a bit of time focusing on. I would just echo everything you said and say, not only are we seeing, and should it be a case where you're going to see that the organizations you're working with, or that our customers of yours are going to ask for cyber insurance, but you as a customer of other organizations should be asking about their cyber insurance. It's a two-way, regardless of where you are, unless you're on one or the other end of the supply chain, and there are very few companies that are in that position. This is a two-way. You should be expecting it. They should be expecting it from you. And it's honestly probably the best lever you've got as a security practitioner to get the rest of the organization and the business to actually play ball. Because when the minute you can say, well, you can't close that $3 million deal you want to close because we don't have cyber insurance, they start to go, okay, what do we need to do? And we'll start carrying the water for you. So thank you both so much. We've got about 2 minutes left before the top of the hour, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time who's been here today. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Sally. Thank you, Andre, for being here, and for participating in the conversation. Thank you again to Sophos for helping to sponsor this. For those of you who are interested, yes, you do get one CPE credit. If you're interested in learning more, these are the kinds of conversations and the kind of discussions, and Andre can attest to. These are the types of discussions we have every day at the Cyber Risk Collaborative, both in our general membership and in our premium membership. These are the kinds of conversations. These are the kind of topics. This topic became a topic that we're talking about at Cyber Risk Alliance because of our members asking for it. So if you want to learn more about the membership, if you want to learn more about the community, please reach out to Tom Ward. I'm also going to put up 2 quick poll questions. You can indicate there that if you would like to learn more about either of the memberships, and we'll be certain to have our team reach out to you. And while we're doing that, I'll give Sally, you just one quick second at the end of this to just wrap up and tell us a little bit about Sophos and where people can find out more if they've been living under a rock and don't know who Sophos is.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so Sophos is a leading global provider of cybersecurity products and services, and we secure more than 600,000 organizations around the globe. So you perhaps have heard of us. We have Sophos Endpoint Protection. We're proud to have been a Gartner Magic Quadrant leader for many, many years. Also, we have Sophos Firewall that is used by more than 300,000 organizations to secure their network. But perhaps also to mention MDR, Managed Detection and Response, because I did drop the acronym. So we are the largest pure play provider of MDR services globally. And that breadth of coverage just means we have so much telemetry into what's going on in the threat environment, what organizations are facing, and are able to maintain these real-time defenses that are based on the broadest range of telemetry. So if you would like to find out more, sophos.com is probably your best place to go, and we'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Andre. Thank you, Sally. Thank you, Sophos. Thank you to the team here at Cyber Risk Alliance that is and the Cyber Risk Collaborative that have made today possible. If you didn't get a chance to respond to either the poll questions, but that you're interested in learning more, please reach out. Myself, Perfect Shaw, anyone at our on our team, Tom Ward, Chris Ancharsky, Melissa Warford. We've got a number of really great upcoming events. Please check your weekly member update. Check out scworld.com. Check out cyberriskcollaborative.com. Thank you all again for being here. Thank you for all of the questions and conversation that we had today. This was really great. Hope everyone has a great weekend, great upcoming weeks. If you're celebrating spring break somewhere in the US or around the world, please be safe, and we'll see you again real soon. Thank you.